Thank you, Diana, and I'm looking forward to seeing all-women panels more and more, not only on the 8th of March, but actually in general. I would like to start with a short intro to the topic. Someone before the discussion told me, that's very abstract, what you're going to talk about. Actually, it's not abstract at all. Every March, International Women's Day serves as a great reminder to reflect on a one-year conversation about gender-balanced investing. And although there has been much said and written and discussed on the topic, the data shows that we still have a way to go before we close the funding gap for female founders. Female founders in Europe are rarity. This is partly because there are also less women starting companies than men in general. But while women represent half of the population, they account for less than a third of the entrepreneurs. And even less are the tech entrepreneurs. Still, it seems to me rather disproportional that data shows that female entrepreneurs polled only 1% of the venture capital investment in 2021. In 2022, this percentage went down. Now it's, so last year it was 0.9, so we're not progressing, actually we're going down. And this is of the total capital invested in venture-backed startups in Europe. So before we start with the discussion, I would like to introduce the amazing women that I have here with me on the stage, starting with Gina, just next to me, who is an investor. She's a mentor, an advisor, and a board member with 20 years of experience as an entrepreneur, but also operational experience herself. Gina is currently co-founder, partner, and chief community officer at Supernode Global, which is an early-stage VC firm that invests in digital content tools and platforms shaping the future of education, entertainment, work, and communication. In addition to investing, Gina oversees the strategy and the development of Supernode's global community of 400 startups across 40 countries. Gina has passion for early-stage startups and is focused on supporting women and underrepresented founders. On the other side, we have Jay Tangnam, and I'm not going to even try to pronounce your surname. I'm sorry for that. You advised me not to try. Jay is part of the investment team of Fund F, being responsible for active deal sourcing, origination, and end-to-end investment execution. She has almost 2.5 years of investment experience working across growth and seed stage deals across Europe and also at Hermès GPE. Yeah. And PropTech One VC.
Yeah.
PropTech One, okay, yeah. Then I have a typo here, I'm sorry. She has also assisted several other micro VCs and female-led scale-up platforms in the UK. Jay brings an MBA from University of Oxford and masters in liberal arts and a bachelor degree in electronics and communication engineering. So she has the foundation for evaluating startups. She started her career at Microsoft as part of the Skype product team. She served as a founding member at a consumer finance startup and then later on as a chief of staff in B2B payments of a startup which is currently a unicorn. Yeah. And Jayashree is also a mentor with the Reach UK accelerator program for carbon turning accelerators, yeah. Right? Yeah. Last but not least, I would like to introduce also Agata Leliwa-Nowicka. Yeah. For the Polish one in the audience, we decided that we're not going to stick to the Polish pronunciation. Agata is an investor at Alondes Partner Groups, an emerging growth stage fund focusing on backing companies leveraging data. She's also a founder of the Female Foundry, and I'm going to ask her a bit more about that, a platform with over 5,000 VCs and female entrepreneurs across Europe with the mission to bring more diversity into the venture capital ecosystem and more funding to female entrepreneurs. Agata serves on boards of several female-founded fintech companies and accelerators in the US and Europe. Please give them a big applause. So I quoted some of the recent data on the topic, but I found also another interesting fact. According to a study led by the Boston Group, Boston Consulting Group, despite receiving less investment in comparison to male peers, female-founded companies deliver twice as much the revenue per dollar invested. So gender-balanced investments should make sense also from a financial perspective, correct? Is it, in your observation, like that also in Europe?
Absolutely. I can go first.
Yeah.
So I think everyone's seen the statistic that women-led teams do outperform solely male-founded teams. And the reasons that we see as investors is that when there's gender balance, there's diversity of perspectives in terms of not being blindsided when there's opportunities for products that may be geared towards women, or there might be platforms and tools being developed that have inclusivity in mind. And when you don't have that type of perspective and you're sort of singular-minded, you end up having those blind spots that could lead to a lower ceiling in terms of your profitability. The other thing that we see is that teams that have gender diversity, for instance, and also people who from different socioeconomic backgrounds tend to be more collaborative and more inclusive, which leads to more employee engagement and better decision making because people are more inclined to be committed to the work that they're working on.
Okay. Can you maybe explain even more directly what is the link between women and why would they make twice as much?
I have no idea, and we just started recently gathering data around this topic, so this is yet to be found out, but definitely there has been a performance pickup when it comes to female founders. I have my own personal reasons that I can maybe debate on, which is women are probably also driven, and having been given very few opportunities, maybe they are more determined to succeed in this ecosystem. So that would be my assumption, but I don't want to be maybe laying out assumptions without yet data. But what is definitely, and I would just touch on Gina's point, is that because I don't want to maybe be making this kind of distinction between female and male, I would like to talk about diversity. And because that's where we see definitely from an investment perspective, that's where the opportunity lies. Because very often when we look at the profile of a typical female founder, I'm saying typical and therefore I'm generalizing that topic, many of women don't have technical backgrounds, and I'm talking about technical backgrounds that will help them to create companies that are scalable, that are venture capital backable. And therefore, they very often bring that technical founder that happens to be a man. We would love to see more women coming, and that's maybe we'll touch on it later. But really where we see the difference is when you combine the two, when you have diversity of backgrounds. And we can be talking about not only women, but also socioeconomic backgrounds. Gender diversity. Yeah. Gender diversity is just part of that, but definitely when you look at Silicon Valley, even some of the best startups out there, I'm not going to be calling names, everyone can look at their phones and they're out there. Definitely when you look at the founding teams, those were diverse teams. So gender diversity is just one lens that we can apply. And definitely over the past few years, since we started tracking that data, we've seen that actually female founders perform much better. So,
I just have something to add on that.
Yeah. Please, Jay.
So this is something that I've seen as a VC. So the kind of questions that different kind of founders get asked. For male, it's usually promotional questions, and if it's a gender diverse team or all female team, it's always risk averse questions. So when you get, which means, so they get prepared. The female teams or gender diverse teams are always extremely well prepared when they come to a pitch event. When they present their forecast for the next 5 years, it's never, okay, first year 1 million, 5 million, 100 million. It's always much more risk adjusted. What's a sustainable business growth? So maybe that is leading to them being extremely prudent, extremely cautious and risk averse in building their, so when I say risk averse, it doesn't mean they're not ambitious. Yes, they're ambitious, but that's not at the cost of burning cash excessively. The second point could be, when you have gender diverse team at the top level, that gets promoted even within to the bottom layer until to the board. So what happens is, when you have an inclusive team, there are certain decisions that get made, which in terms of people stick on longer. So employee retention costs go down. So once there's research that shows that once an employee stays for more than 3 years, their performance, their contribution to the team and the company is exceptional, which you don't get in a hire and fire sort of culture, which is usually there in a hyper fast growing startup. So I think there are certain merits to having empathy as a core value when you're a leader, when you lead with empathy first, when you lead with people first. Maybe these tendencies, which are usually conventionally called feminine, conventionally not consider good enough to build a unicorn or a decacorn. Maybe these things have helped, and now with data, with very basic data that we're seeing, there are trends that are emerging, which we want to sort of showcase and everyone reads, so that everyone reads it. Consider this as another data point when they're investing in both female GPs and female founders who are entrepreneurs. So yeah, maybe just wanted to add a couple of
That's
points
interesting.
to that, yeah.
Of course, there is always also the other view that it's like a chicken egg problem, where we would say of those 1% of women who are getting venture backed, they should be really like the top performers.
Stars.
Yeah, so they should be performing really
maybe.
well. So I guess maybe there is a correlation in both sides, but I was also curious when you say a promotion question and a risk-averse question. Can you give like an example?
Sure.
Because I think when we give the examples, we actually become aware of biases that we are not often conscious of.
That's a tough one. Let me think of something that's relevant. Let's say someone's starting a company in chemical manufacturing industry, and it's the pitch is we are the next ChatGPT building and revolutionize the chemical manufacturing industry, and the VC goes, oh my God, how much do you want, or how big is the market size, or what's the next big thing that you're building, or anything like, okay, so the market size now is, let's say, 1 trillion. But do you think with the introduction of your new product, you can create a new market, new niche, something like that?
Yeah.
What's next? How big can this be? Versus when there's a female entrepreneur, it's going to be, do you have the right sales team to sort of win the dark German-speaking market? Who are your next top 3 hires? Okay, if your top hire has to be a sales and marketing super manager or a manager head from that company, do you have the budget for that? Where will you get the budget? Or your valuation is too high? You know, something like that, risk aversion questions, or just, something like that,
I see.
I could just track, I will just, because I've been a founder myself, and I've faced this issue couple of times, actually a few times, without actually realizing that this is an issue. I thought that this is a status quo, this is how things are going to be. Because my first startup, actually, I set up as a solo founder that I managed to sell in Asia, in Hong Kong. And as a solo founder and actually being in a foreign market, actually, I accepted things, and have never been a founder myself, I accepted things how they were. Things changed when I moved to set up my second company in the capital market space. That, as we all agree, has majority of capital markets, especially in investment banking, are still men in the decision making. So I would say having a co-founder, and my co-founder is a male co-founder, has changed that dynamic and made me realize that, first of all, speaking with VC investors on the other side, that I would say I had only one occurrence over probably 30 pitches that we had when I had a female investor on the other side. which, in my opinion, maybe it wouldn't make a difference, to be honest, because eventually you actually are supposed to be evaluating a business, not necessarily the people. But where I could see, where I kind of had the idea after these 30 pitches, where we would probably expect, we actually were playing a game with my co-founder, and we would be literally saying, these are the questions that I'm going to get asked, and these are the questions that you're going to get asked. And what we did in the process, we actually started just testing VCs on the other side. Just actually, my co-founder would be twisting the questions, so would be pushing the questions about the vision, about our ambition, about how we are going to transform capital market space. And how he's going to be running the nitty-gritty accounting part, which was very interesting. So for us, that was one of the evaluation criteria actually that VCs would be going through. And really seeing their reaction towards me actually leading this company in the capital market space as opposed to him. So yes, it's very interesting. Definitely that exposed a lot of biases and a lot of very interesting dynamics, but I think it was very helpful for our internal process of evaluation as well. Yeah.
I just
Go on. We opened the topic, the Pandora
as a
box.
fund manager, in terms of actionable ways that we can create change, we have a team of 6 on our team. We have recently decided to have a questionnaire that has consistency across our DD process. So regardless of whether it's a B2B SaaS product led by an all-male team or an all-female-led team building, another different marketplace product, we have the same set of questions. And while we do have those in-person or online virtual meetings, at the end of the day, we look at the data on what the answers are, and we try to have an unbiased review of what it is that they're sharing with us. I have male team members who have the best intentions, but we all recognize we have unconscious bias based on our lived experience. So one of the things that we're doing is going through training internally so that our team is all more conscious and aware of where our own blind spots are. And regardless of whether it's a man or a woman, I think everyone has opportunity to improve in that area. Yeah. And there's one of the things I think we've seen is with the statistics, there's a lot of awareness, but less action. So I think what we all need to do is think about goals and KPIs that we can set internally. It starts inside first before you can actually help the ecosystem change. And then also one of the challenges that we see is actually a lot of funds have these goals, but they don't talk about it. And so if you don't talk about it and communicate it, then the rest of the ecosystem doesn't really understand how they can be better as well. And I would also just add that it starts with LPs.
We're going to come to those actionable points because I really want you to add, each of you, what you have seen that is working. But I would like to maybe catch a bit on what Agatha said. So I read a report by the European Women in VC that found out that only 15% of the VC general partners in Europe are women. Agatha, we spoke about, maybe you mentioned a different report that says that it's 5%, or let's assume it's between 5 and 15, but 15 I think it's tops, which is still very low. So how do you, I mean, do you believe that increasing the number of GPs would also increase the number of investments made in gender diverse teams and women founded teams? And how is this relation going to play out?
Maybe I can actually quote one other research. Actually, last year, PitchBook actually performed this research. I think they've done the research study on about 120 funds in the US, though, that showed that, firstly, diverse GP, like funds led by diverse teams on the gender level in the VC funds are twice as likely to invest in diverse teams, founder teams, which is quite striking actually as an insight. And secondly, funds, the same funds actually that were diverse, were performing at a much higher level, and more accurately, their exit value was 9.7% higher, which again, it's significant. Okay. So again, when you look at just statistics without doing anything, I think that we should all care about this issue if we just focus on economic outcome of our investments.
This is what we usually care about the most. I mean, the regulators are going to push us also in the other directions.
Without any other, obviously, because of course there's the agenda of ESG and diversity is picking up on its pace, and definitely it's part of that kind of impact bucket right now. And I know that 30%, over 30% of LPs put that diversity or ESG bucket as part of their allocation strategy. Now, we don't know how much of that goes to climate and gender and so on yet, but definitely we see that trend emerging, and I think that now the objective is to, if you can combine the two, if you can combine, and I would say that's where we are really, that's where we should be aiming for. Combining returns with impact. I think that's where we'll be really truly successful. So,
yes, Gina?
Yeah, I was just going to add, yes, absolutely. If we have more women decision makers making investment decisions, we will see more diversity in terms of gender balanced investments. There are more junior level women investors, but what we see is quite a challenge for them to get beyond the associate level and to become members on the investment committee. So one of the key ways that we can change that is to develop policies that make it more accessible for women to progress and develop in their career within a fund. And also from the LP perspective, there are many more women emerging managers now than ever before. And there are many opportunities to invest in women who are not only looking at investing in women founders, but very conscious of the financial returns that come from diverse teams. I think all of us agree that it's really diversity that we're aiming for and balance. It's not about only pushing women, but clearly there's a big gap. So we need to do everything we can to close that gap. With LPs in mind, I think one of the things that we have seen, we're raising our second fund, so I have quite a lot of recent experience speaking with LPs.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was just about to ask you if, part of the reason that there are less partners in the VC firms which are women is because of the fundraising part. I mean, I don't have much contact with LPs, but I would assume that the majority of them will be men. So how do they feel about investing in a fund which is led by a woman? Are they maybe biases as well?
Well, we all have biases, so I wouldn't, place too much blame on the bias that may come into play. But I think one of the issues is for funds that are raising, say, under $100 million, usually family offices and private investors are the target LP base. Only about 7% of them are women decision makers, and so when you factor that into the conversations, it's really difficult for women GPs to stand out. And people tend to invest in people that look like them, unfortunately, and also come from the same backgrounds. So whether it's socioeconomic or from the same university or from the same sort of corporate background or career background. So I think the more that there's awareness of the diversity of managers, fund managers, that capital can be allocated towards, the more that we can help to make a change in terms of the allocations. Also, in terms of the percentage of AUM that fund managers have control over, if we look within the European funds, I believe it's only 5%. So more women GPs need to have access to bigger funds to make decisions. And we see a lot of momentum right now with new managers who are women, as well as bigger funds that are elevating women to become GPs. But I think the more that larger organizations can have diversity programs or accelerators also that focus on women founders, the more that we can bring more awareness to the issues and help to sort of create actionable plans, because I think one of the issues so far is that all these reports are generated, which is really useful, but then it sort of stops there. There isn't much more conversation about what can happen beyond knowledge of
Having the data
disparities.
points.
That's a great point, Gina. Jay, you wanted to add something?
Oh, I would just agree to what Gina
Agreed,
said.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's good to have the data point, but it's up to us, all of us, the GPs, LPs, the founders, the family offices, the ultra high net worth individuals, exited founders, to sort of really think DEI is DPI, and really think about this as your strategy, like key strategy, and not as an auxiliary strategy. And really think about this. Use all the data there's available. So many reports are out there. But also risk it and experiment. So you create new data point for yourself. So that's it. Yeah.
That's very much true. I'm coming from communication, and what I've seen so far, especially in these times of misinformation, is that data doesn't really help fight biases. It's very interesting. I mean, you can quote so much data, create so much awareness, but sometimes biases are much deeper in
But I think that fighting biases starts with data. Because you need to start being
why
aware of the issue
This
before
is
you
why
start
we
to
laid the ground. So, but let's move maybe really to the actionable things that, or points that we can introduce as hands-on practice, so that we have this gender lens, investing both in companies, women-led companies, or even teams which are diverse. I think this is what also kind of like makes sense, because we don't have that many of them as well. But also on the fundraising level of the funds, because obviously this is a bias that is playing a role not only in the deal flow, but also on the side of the VCs. And it's somehow like going down the supply chain or the capital chain. I'm not sure how to call it. So Gina, you wanted to mention them before. I had written down that, first of all, you actually defined the process of you speaking to founders. You have a questionnaire, which is incorporating the gender lens in a way, or
yes. So
can you tell us a bit more about the questionnaire?
Absolutely, but maybe taking a step back, I think one of the actionable ways, as I mentioned earlier, it starts from within. So looking at how you make decisions as a fund manager, into making sure that your sourcing is as diversified as it can be. So you're meeting women founders, diverse founders, and then when you meet them, that you're assessing them in a way that is objective, and with everyone on your team to also make sure that you're being consistent. So with the questionnaire, for example, that is one way that we have done it. We're also doing our training, but also we ask the founders to give us feedback, because they meet a ton of investors. We want to know how we're presenting ourselves as well. So it's a two-way street, because when we invest in a company, it's like a marriage. It's a really long-term relationship. We want it to be productive. And so we recognize that, as investors, yes, we give capital, but it is a company and a team that we really want to believe can scale to a venture scalable outcome that has huge impact on the world. So we take it very seriously, but really the change starts at the top. So the LPs in the room, you have all the power here to invest in fund managers that have the consciousness and awareness, but then are actually putting it into practice. And that's really the only way that we'll see change. And then on the other end, on the entrepreneur side, if there are women entrepreneurs who are first-time founders who have zero network, they also need to be educated and supported to understand how to compete with their male peers, because oftentimes they're coming at it at a position of weakness because they just don't know what they should know. And I think now what's really exciting is there are a lot of organizations like Agatas that focuses on women founders, supports them, gives them mentorship. We just need more of those, and we also need bigger companies and bigger funds to start those initiatives as well, because the more assets that we can drive towards making these actionable changes, the closer that we'll get to actually closing that gap, because I think the research has shown that if we stay at the same pace of lack of action,
200 years?
it's going to take 137 years, I think?
200, I
200? Okay, well, we won't live that long to
Yeah.
see it. But I would like to live,
Yeah.
I'd like to see it happen.
In your lifetime.
In my lifetime,
Yeah.
in our lifetime,
Yes.
yes, and not see the percentages continue to drop. If you look at the global entrepreneurial landscape, 38% of all businesses are owned by women or led by women. And so even if we get to 38%, I think that would be a huge improvement.
True. We're actually leaving also money on the table when we don't invest in women, but that's another study that I'm going to quote another time. Agatha, I'm sure that you can also maybe add to the discussion, because
Yeah.
you are in this network and you have surely observed and developed actionable ways of how first we can increase investments in women-founded companies. How can we maybe support women in VC, but also how can we nudge LPs to invest in emerging women
Yeah.
funds?
So first of all, I see it as a structural change that needs to happen, really, because we are talking about LPs, VCs, founders, as it trickles down, but I think that we should be also thinking about macro, meaning what are the norms that we currently accept within the venture capital ecosystem. Then on the, let's say, mezzanine level, what are the networks that we've created that we really, as like a echo chamber, work for us or maybe start to work against us at this stage? And then on the microeconomic, micro level, what are the interactions that we encourage within our practices that maybe exclude some groups that can work for us? So when we look at this kind of from this perspective, I would say we've gone really far when it comes to the micro level interactions. There are so many platforms, and VC industry even as a whole has become much less opaque and kind of more proactive when it comes to even speaking with founders, emerging managers, and so on. But I think that where the next change is going to come is when we start looking at our networks and we start kind of going against the grain, against what we know, and really test some of our assumptions when it comes to returns, but also in terms of possibility for our own growth. So I would definitely encourage those interactions. Again, every fund, every LP is different. I would say one of the challenges that we also, and that kind of comes back to that norm and kind of policy level, that is a little bit stopping us. I don't have the answer for that, but obviously in the VC industry, we deal with extremely long feedback loop problem. So even if we implement the change today, we're going to see the results of that change probably at the exit time, which is on average 10 years. So this is why we lack that data, by the way. But then maybe there are some creative ideas, and I know that there are more and more initiatives that come from EIF or UK government, actually most recently started a group that is going to push these barriers forward. But I really feel that we need to be looking at this problem from the macro and micro level at the same time to really really solve for that. And just so I don't leave you without a practical kind of tip, I think that when you look at even on the investment side, on the cap table, because everybody says we need more women on the cap table, but cap table, really being on the cap table doesn't only reflect capital. Let's not forget about that. It reflects guidance, mentorship, opening up those networks for female founders that they might have not been able to access. And therefore, this is a kind of very, I sit at on some boards, and I'm still surprised that for female-founded startups, there are male founders that are by no means actually going to be valuable for a femtech startup. I know that because they don't really even understand the product, and there's no criticism about that. It's just I think that we should be looking at our own practices and seeing how can we help within this ecosystem to actually, because we have all aligned incentives. That's a beautiful thing about it today. How we can encourage to make these not only funds, not only VC funds, but also founders to thrive, because then hopefully in the next few years we are going to see that change.
Thank you, Agatha. Jay, I'm sure that you also have some tips.
Yeah, I mean, my fund, we have a thesis of investing in gender diverse founders across Europe and UK. I mean, we've been evolving a process because we strongly believe when things get tough, you don't race to the situation, but you fall to the level of your standards of your process. So I think I would completely agree. It needs to start from within, have really strong processes, and DEI or gender diversity or diversity as an agenda has to be driven down, top down, and it's not something that'll just happen. It needs to be proactive. Your leader or your team leader, team manager needs to speak about this every single day, from not just hiring 10 analysts that are gender diverse, but how do we promote them? Again, comes back to policy, the macro level. So think of a company as a microcosm of how the world works. So if people don't go up the ladder within a company, then it's not going to happen in the world. And if they don't go up, which means they don't have access to capital or their own personal net worth. If they don't have access to personal net worth and money balance sheet, they're not going to invest in other emerging managers that are female or gender diverse managers. So it's again a very systemic problem. But what we've been doing internally is unbias ourselves. I mean, yes, I'm female, but that doesn't mean I didn't grow up in the same system that my fellow male colleague grew up in or studied in. So we always have second POV for everything. I mean, there's one person who's leading a deal, but there's always another person who's neutral who comes in and says, okay, I agree with whatever the assessment, or this is too critical, too ambitious, something like that. So we always try to unbias ourselves, and we have a standard questionnaire checklist, which is the same thing, gets curated based on the business model in the company, but that really helps. Yeah, and the other thing that we've been discovering is it's great to give them capital, but the buck doesn't stop there. You need to help them, support them, get that networks. And how do you do that? So again, process. We have already set everything up, automated everything, so they get access to that the time that they need it. So they're not on phone calls. They don't have to come to a networking event at 9 p.m. and stuff like that. So it's all automated. So they have access to the networks that any other founder might have. I think that's really key, to sort of set up processes and unbias your process. So always have a second, third POV or point of view to unbias yourself. I think that really helps.
Jay, I was also curious, is there a difference between coaching a female founder or a male founder?
No. No, I think it depends on the strengths of a person. For example, someone might come from a very technical background, they're a PhD in something, but now they need commercial skills. So that coaching, the network that they need is more sales and business, commercial side of things. So that's where they need more support. Then there's someone who's much more commercial, marketing background, but they need more of financial advice and financial support and things like that. So mentoring, the network, the introductions are usually curated and more people specific, founder specific. And that's why having a really good team, a diverse team in terms of talent, background, agenda is so helpful, so complementary, really gets you, if one person, it really gets you far into the startup entrepreneurship journey. Yeah.
Agatha?
I just want to add one thing that hasn't been maybe included in this conversation up to this point, because when I was setting up Female Foundry, that now has grown into this incredible network across Europe, one thing that I said to myself was that female founder, even though the name might not reflect that, is for both gender. Actually, my mission was from the beginning to make this topic incredibly inclusive.
Yeah.
I don't believe in closed networks. I think that they are self-serving and actually they are very limiting. So I would say this is why we are here, to bring more men into the conversation. I think it starts with awareness, and I think it's about not necessarily criticizing what's happening now, but really focusing on action and moving this topic forward. So
What I really like about this topic is that it actually creates this virtuous cycle, because when there are more LPs investing in emerging women-led VC firms, then they would invest in more women-led founder startups, and then we would have more exiting companies creating more and more capital, so you would have more LPs than recycling the money.
and the more men are
so
part
at
of that
some point-
value creation,
Much
let's be
better.
honest, the better. Today, 30% of our Action Network are men, and this is the fastest growing category, which makes me the most, actually, even happier than seeing another founder, another woman, because that's how we're going to change this topic.
Cool. I would suggest that we continue the conversation on practical tips. Maybe this is a good conversation opener now at our cocktail. Like, what do you do in order to open more opportunities for women, both as VCs but also as founders? I want to thank you for bringing this topic on the level where we speak about the opportunities, because I totally agree with you. The data is not enough. We can look at it, and sometimes it feels to me that it's just polarizing the topic even more, but it's actually not bringing us into the solution thinking. And after all, problem solving is what we preach as a value in our ecosystem. I think, looking more into the actionable items that we can bring in our agendas and trying different approaches is going to be the right course of action here. I have Gina?
I was just going to add that
Okay.
actually quite a lot of funds have a diversity element to their assessment of startups and the teams that lead those startups. I think the latest statistic is 65% of VC funds look for diverse policies or some sort of a DEI agenda. And the interesting thing, though, is that it's not reflected in the funds themselves. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch in what investors are looking for in terms of what they're looking to invest in and what they actually
practice
represent.
what you preach, yeah.
So
of course.
I think that's another area of opportunity, is to make that reflected internally as well in the funds, because that inherently will lead to achieving those outcomes, even if they look for teams with a diverse agenda or having some sort of DEI policy. If they're not actioned, then they're not going to see the returns that they expect.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways.
Thank you, Gina. That was an important point. Yes, I have the pleasure, in the name of the organizers of the Alpha Wolves, to invite you now to our cocktail, which is going to be just outside. Monica, it's all correct?
Yes, but if there are any questions from the audience, we still have some time.
I wasn't sure if you have a microphone.
Yeah, we do. So, are there any questions?
If you have also practical advice that you can share, it shouldn't be only questions, by the way. It would
Don't be shy.
Let's go
Okay.
into action. Yes,
Okay.
please.
Thank you, Monica. Hi, everyone. I came to London 19 years ago, right? So I was Eastern European woman in finance industry. And I had 8 companies in total. My 8th company is now family office. And my take on the world is as follows: the world of men, women, gender diversity, any type of diversity. If you come to wherever you go, confident, knowledgeable, bring the right type of energy into a room, my experience is I never felt disadvantaged as a woman. I've only heard it's a problem after I raised very good money, from High Street Bank as a debt, with my company at the time having revenue zero. It's like, and I made success of it. So I sometimes feel like I understand the issue broadly, but I try to bring down to personality. Are you right person to actually make success of this business? Do you understand? Does it make sense? Because investors, I don't have bad experience of ever working with men. So my take is, women, please go forward, less thinking on this sort of gender thing. Switch on all your charm, enthusiasm, equipped with knowledge, show a case. If it's a case, then money will be there, from US, from Europe, from, Middle East, from wherever. Good luck.
Thank you. Thank you. But let's not come to the conclusion that 85% of the women GPs don't have the personality
And charm.
and charm that you have. Where I would agree here,
they don't use their power.
where I would,
In the nicest way.
exactly.
It's wonderful to work with men. I am absolutely no man. It takes two to tango, and I don't believe, and I hope I am understood correctly. I know no one is blaming anyone, but ultimately it's very good to be self-reflective. Am I not getting money because that guy or guys has something against my gender? Or maybe I'm not well prepared. Maybe it's not a good time to go with my pitch. Am I in a mood to raise money? It's like you have to be very self-reflective, and I think you actually have to be switched on. And successful people know exactly what I mean. If you are switched on, no one will stop you. You will raise money.
Mindset is a very deep topic. We can stay until 5 o'clock in the morning and still talk about it, so it's a dangerous one, but I would agree with you, we shouldn't be victimized. We shouldn't victimize ourselves. This is where I totally agree with you. Yes, I'm sorry, I want to give the opportunity also
Thanks,
to
thanks.
a male.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing your views. Yes, Sergey from European Investment Fund, EIF. Just basically, I wanted to support your comments that LPs should do their part. Basically, we are as one of the largest EU-based LP. We highly welcome diverse teams, female-led teams, and that is actually indeed a point in our assessment criteria. So we welcome diverse teams, and please, on a practical note, please do spread the news around the VC managers community that we do that. Thank you very much.
Happy to
Thank
do
you.
that, especially
Thank
as a
you.
media
Yeah.
platform.
Oh,
Maybe tomorrow.
come on, yes.
We like the audience.
Come on, yeah, come on.
But I don't know how the others feel, but yeah, whatever.
Hi, my name is Alina Stefan.
Hi.
I have a question, but it's actually a topic that I want to revise. One of the things that you actually mentioned was that there's not a difference in between coaching women and coaching men. And I mentor in Romania, and I mentor a lot of young women and a lot of future founders of businesses or actual founders. And I came to realize that it's a big gap, actually. It's a big difference when you coach female founders. And one of the things that I discovered is that the difference, right, the delta between the two is in the case of the women, they stand in their way, in the sense that before we start to work on their businesses and their strategies, we have to work a lot on the personal, because the biggest obstacle is themselves. So,
In what terms would you agree with, I'm sorry, I don't know your name?
Natalia.
With Natalia, that women are not working enough on their personality, they're not good enough.
oh no. It's not that. It's that they are not even aware of the potential. They focus on their faults, on their good, I'm not good enoughs. So it's a lot of work to discover themselves, to help them, guide them to discover themselves. So I'm not going into the comparison, or I'm just talking as a female founder of businesses, an ex-CEO, a business advisor. I think it's a big difference, but not by comparison, just something that we should take into account when we work and develop and encourage founders, especially women founders. So it's not with no regards to as a comparison to male founders. I'm just saying to kind of take into account that aspect. And I think all of you have a lot of experience with that and know exactly where I'm coming from.
Thank you. I see a gentleman here.
Yeah.
I see there are a lot of questions.
Right.
Okay, it's good.
Thank you. Marco from UKTA.
Can you speak?
Firstly, thank you for
Great. Now we can hear you.
highlighting some of the issues that you've raised, because obviously as a male who's been an entrepreneur and has done it sort of naturally, that's something I've always wanted to do. I don't see your perspective on the obstacles that you face when you're going through your challenges. My question really is, were there women that inspired you as you were sort of wanting to be successful in your own careers? Is that what made you strive? Or was it family? What was it that made you all want to sort of succeed? And
That's another
what
big
will other
topic.
women then, obviously, or young women especially, maybe at university now?
Can I take that? I
Yeah.
think that's a great and a very important question. So at least for me, growing up, I didn't have enough female role models. So So but what really motivates us is the fact that, can I get there as well? But I don't see many women there. But what can I do to get there? Is there really a glass ceiling? But how can I shatter that glass ceiling? I think every child has ambitions, but the struggle here is not is to think about how can we have more people that look like myself to the top. I think if I get there, then I become that example for someone else that's 5 years old and looks for a role model. I think that's the ambition, that's the vision. I guess, yeah.
I truly believe in role models myself
For me
as well.
personally-
Agatha,
yeah, for me personally, I actually have never had big role models. Actually, I've been driven always by an opportunity that has been presenting itself in front of me, and that's really kicked me into staying up in the night and really making that vision happen. So, and I feel that's happening up to this point, even though up to today, obviously, now I am surrounded with so many incredible women, but still what really drives me is the opportunity first. And then hopefully I find that support network with men and women both to make that vision happen.
Yep.
Gina?
I've always worked in male-dominated fields,
Yeah.
and I've been fortunate to have men around me, colleagues who have supported me. And so I've actually had more male role models than women.
Yeah.
And because there weren't other women role models, I think it propelled me to want to get to a place where I could become one. But I think it is an important point that men can be role models for women.
Yeah.
Because, and it's so important to actually play that role because there aren't enough women, unfortunately, yet to be that person.
Yeah. For me as well, actually many supporters early on in some of the ventures, and my first career was actually in architecture, which was completely male-dominated, were men. But it's interesting that how I didn't have that perspective on gender. I just saw them as great people. So yeah, it's interesting. We assume that, at least for me personally, I only recently started to have that because that topic of gender has become more and more important. Even though when we look at 1960s, that's where it all started. I cannot remember that, by the way. Yes, so I think that we don't necessarily see ourselves through a gender lens, but yet the opportunities that present themselves in front of us very often are, let's say, challenged because of that gender lens, which is quite interesting. I actually just want to mention something very interesting. I had a chat today with a researcher actually at one of the leading investment banks, and he made a very interesting actually insight that I'm definitely going to be reusing. Because he said, you know, Agata, we in capital markets really value diversity. I'm constantly looking for diversifying my portfolio to reduce risk.
Yes, yeah.
What happens in your world is diversity, if anything, is perceived as an increased risk for return. So this is maybe something interesting to have in mind, that our perception plays such an important role, yet it doesn't really make sense when it comes to our returns. So, yeah.
That's a good one. I can speak only from the perspective of an entrepreneur. I'm not a VC yet, might be at some point, but I would say here, I think growing up in Eastern Europe, I had a different perspective on what's gender, because my mother was a fighter. She had a career, so that's one thing. I think, in a way, I grew up in a society that was a bit more balanced or equalized by political agendas. And on the second, it was actually one of my early co-founders in a venture before that who supported me. I never thought that I would be an entrepreneur. I never even aspired to that. But there was someone who believed in me. And he believed also that future is female, so he was really putting a lot of effort to support me to get out there. We had another one, exactly. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm Elmer Esther, and I'm Impact VC. So what I have no questions, and I don't want to argue against anything. I just want to share with you really quickly, some information that we are a really gender balanced team. Actually, we have more female than males in our team, and it was not an intention. So when we selected the juniors, it was not an intention to make a gender balanced team. So it was only the intention to get the excellences. And actually it became this team, so it was never an intention, but I'm happy with this. And something what is probably a bit too emotional, and forgive me because of that, but I think the activity what we are doing to invest in companies is a bit, for me, and it's emotional, and forgive me, it's a bit like fatherhood, so parenthood, yes. So I'm really happy to share with my concerns, with my ideas with females, and think about the company and the team and the growth of the team and the support what we want to provide for the team with the women. So this is really good for me, and I feel myself really comfortable in this situation. So my message is only that the gender diverse team is perfect for this VC activity.
Because it symbolizes in a way the parenthood where you have
probably I don't know. It's I can't I can't from a scientific prospect I can't argue for this. This is my feeling and this is my experience, and it's pretty good.
Thank you for sharing. Great. Is there someone else who would like to make a comment, or we can also do it in bilateral conversations outside? I think we throw enough gunpowder in the in the room. Good. Thank you so much also for appearing, so many of you, and for your time, for your inputs. I hope you would have an enjoyable evening and an exciting conference tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you as well.